In this morning with more on the growing row between China and Australia over the coronavirus outbreak. Beijing has reacted angrily after calls from Australian officials for an independent investigation into the causes of the pandemic. Prime Minister Scott Morrison is on record saying, and I quote, "It's entirely reasonable that the world would want to have an independent assessment of how this occurred."
China over its handling of the outbreak, but it seems a near neighbor asking awkward questions has hit a nerve. The editor of the state media Global Times newspaper went on social media to say how Australia is always making trouble for his country. It's a bit like chewing gum stuck on the sole of China's shoes, he said. Sometimes you have to find a stone to rub it off.
Well, to tell us more, we can now turn to the Australian Senator, James Paterson from the governing Liberal Party. Morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us, or I believe it might be afternoon where you are. Senator, please, let's start by clarifying what exactly your government wants, what Prime Minister Morrison has been demanding of China.
Good morning. Well, we haven't demanded anything of China. All that the Morrison government has proposed through our Foreign Minister, Maurice Payne, is that it's in the interests of the world that a genuinely independent scientific investigation take place into the origins of the coronavirus, because the entire world needs to learn the lessons of this crisis. With more than 200,000 people dead, millions affected, and effectively the global economy cratered, it would be very strange if we weren't interested in getting to the bottom of the exact origins of this virus and the lessons that we need to learn from it.
However, isn't that ongoing anyway? Isn't that what has been happening, not just from the World Health Organization, but all governments have been asking from the beginning where this stemmed from? And now, after seeing what's happened in China, how South Korea has combated it, lessons have been learned. And in a way, what would you then say to the Beijing authorities that say, well, hold on a minute, this sounds just like Donald Trump, who at one stage was saying this is a Chinese virus, and that's where we started from, almost parroting his words, they feel?
Well, no independent scientific investigation has been conducted, and there are still lots of unanswered questions. We believe it's most likely that the virus originated in or around the wet markets in Wuhan, but that has not been conclusively demonstrated. And it's important that we understand both exactly how it originated, but also how it spread, and the policies that were put in place to mitigate its spread in the early stages, and whether different policies could have been put in place that would have been more successful and avoided the catastrophe that we are currently seeing. This is not something which is unusual. This is something which would be very surprising if the world did not demand from any country from which a deadly virus has emanated.
What will this mean? I mean, because this is clearly causing tensions with your most powerful neighbour. What will this mean for you as you move on, even if we're talking about as a trading partner, and the possible economic consequences if tensions escalate even further?
China is a very significant trading partner with Australia. We're very proud to have a free trade agreement with them, which was commenced in 2015. Our trade has grown since that time. About a third of Australia's exports go to China, and that includes many critical inputs for Chinese industry like iron ore and gas and coal. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, and we want it to continue and prosper. However, we will not allow threats to the implications of that trade to overshadow our national interest, and we will always pursue our national interest regardless of those threats.
You've talked of threats. What could you explain further when I heard the term threats of economic coercion? In what form have these taken?
The ambassador from China in Australia did an interview with a newspaper here in Australia a few days ago, in which he said that if Australia continued to push for an investigation, that he thought it was likely that the Chinese public would boycott Australian exports, including beef and wine, and that Chinese tourists and students may be less willing to come to Australia as a result. That's been interpreted by my government, and I think all independent observers, as a very clear and obvious attempt at economic coercion. It will not affect our decision making. It will not affect our advocacy of this, because it is in the genuine interests of the globe.
Senator Paterson, thank you very much for joining us today.